I'm comfortable starting, yeah. If we run into something where we can't proceed, we'll just have to suspend the, recess, I'm sorry, recess. You just turn it upside down gently, like Zapp's potato chips. There you go. The spices are on top.
Okay. I had not thought about that. So I do like that.
Well, that's how you get that flavor from the first bite instead of the last one.
Okay.
Open the bottom of the bag gently.
She wants to use your credit card.
Cardiologist will not be happy with you.
Everybody emailed me, everybody called. Still trying to sell something.
One says, hello, this is Katie. Click.
So I got one call from your daughter. And I answered the phone. Nobody was on it. I blocked it. I called her. And I said, what in the? Yeah, I told you that.
Sad.
Old bird.
End of an era.
Smokey and the band.
No, what?
We'll see Smoking Band reruns now.
Oh, yeah.
On every channel.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna stay on the same. Oh, wow. Jeez. They're all crazy.
Okay, say when. We ready to go? Okay. Hereby call the September 6, 2018 Design Review Board meeting to order. And according to our agenda, we do not have minutes to consider. So do we have any announcements, staff?
Other than our two members that said we're not going to attend, no announcements.
Okay. In that case, the first item to be heard is the Seacrest Dental. That's how it's described. So do we have an applicant that wants to make a presentation? If everybody could, when you approach the dais, if you could introduce yourself and spell your last name for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Robert Carroll, McNeil Carroll Engineering, 17800 Panama City Beach Parkway. I'm the registered agent and civil engineer on the project. The architect is here. He's going to go over the colors and all the pretty stuff. But what we're proposing to do, it's actually right up the street here, is build a dental office, which will be located on the street sign, and then it'll be a separate building in the back. I think in the reading, it sounds like it's one building, but it's actually two separate structures with a breezeway between the two.
Okay.
The square footages are listed on here. So we're proposing two buildings, parking, not asking for any parking deviations or reduction in parking, even though we can, being on the corridor, we do meet all the parking criteria. Pretty straightforward. There's an old parking lot that was on the site that was used by DOT when they had their trailer there when they were building the bridge. So the other part of the parcel has not been cleared yet, so we'll clear it, put the two buildings, parking lot. They have an established business here in Walton County. They're just relocating to this site. So I'm going to turn it over to John if he can answer any questions about colors or anything to do with the building itself.
Okay. What is the, just to help us understand what we're looking at, what is the use of the building in the back?
It'll be some type of rental office space.
Okay.
He's
So
not
it
sure
is
the tenants yet, but it's set up as office space.
Okay.
My name is John Snell, S-N-E-L-L, with Design Build System. I'm the owners of Design Build Systems, and I am the architect for the project. As Robert explained, this front building closest to the road, which appears on the drawings in front of you, A2.1. A2.1 has all the elevations for the building closest to the road. The elevation facing south, which faces Elmore's Landing. You know where Elmore's Landing is. And then there's two lots to the north of Elmore's Landing. This development is on those two lots. The parking lot for this development will be adjacent to the north property line of the Elmore's Landing. So our building, this is the dental building here, will be set back 120 feet or so from the property line on the south side. This is what you can see on that elevation. The elevation that faces the siding, and we mixed in the hardy board shape siding to give it a contrast of color and also contrast of texture. The owner wanted to have something like the donut hole down at 38, US 98, it's a finish. So that's, we ended up with this textured shade siding. I brought the colors, the actual colors, samples from hardy board. This is the blue. Unfortunately, when we print out stuff, it doesn't come out exactly the right color. This is the blue, big blue, and this is the gray. So you'll have, this will be the blue here, and then the gray will be the lap siding. Because, again, the way this side is laid out, the back of the building, if you will be this elevation. Now, this is just the dental building. But what we've done here is we have parapets all around. There's a parapet here, three parapets here, and then on the front of the building we have 2 parapets. And the reason we did that is this roof is a low slope roof to the north, but with parapets all the way around, we've hidden the roof. There's no mechanical equipment on the roof, so there's nothing to look at. We don't typically put anything on our roofs anyway, but this is a way to hide gutters, scuppers, and that type of thing by parapeting all the way around. Now, the other building, this is the office building that you asked about, Mr. Baker.
Yes.
This sits next to the dental building. The dental building would sit here, and then you'd see this building. So we've made them look as alike as we possibly can, so they look like one building. They have the same trim, they have the same features, the same canopies, and the same storefront. This building faces south. The other main elevation of this building is on the west, and that's this elevation right here. That faces the parking lot to the west. You can't see it from anywhere, it's facing the woods, but we try to make it as attractive as the front of the building. This is the back of this building, which again has a parapet, it's stepped. And we've introduced doors and windows so that in a way, even though it's the back of the building, it looks like it could be a front. And so we spent a little more putting windows, doors, and canopies on the north elevation. So as you drive down 331 south, and you look at this building, you're going to see something that looks like the front of the building. This architectural trick was also used on Silver Sands. If you drive by Silver Sands, you will see on the ends of their buildings that are columns and they have a little parapet and so on and so forth. It kind of looks like, doesn't look like the back of the building. This is an example of the aluminum storefront. It's just ordinary, plain, clear aluminum storefront. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Sure.
Now, where would the aluminum be?
The aluminum is on the windows. It's surrounding it's the storefront right here. It's this storefront, all the windows.
What were the canopies?
The canopies there are 2 types of canopies. The flat canopy comes out from the building 4 feet and has these aluminum supports, very attractive type supports. The other canopies are what I'd call an awning. They're galvanized material. It looks like that, but it's a galvanized steel material rather than aluminum because it has to be mounted on steel supports to come out from the building. So that roof is galvanized steel supports. So it does have an attraction like the owner wanted, which was to make it look, she said, make it look like the donut hole. Well, I couldn't make it look like the town hall, but it has some of the same features of the,
I have a question about the packet. The lighting plan is identified in its title as lighting calculations alternate, but that's sheet LC1A, but I don't see another sheet that I would guess was called LC1. So is this alternate actually not an alternate? This is the lighting plan?
it is.
Okay.
When I had my lighting consultant, Hank Lawson, do this for me, it was an alternate scheme.
Okay, all right. Okay, and it appears I'm making an educated guess that the letters MH14 is an indicator of mounting height 14?
Yes, that's a 14-foot.
Yep,
The
standard.
light poles, excuse me, Mr. Bailey, the light poles will be a maximum of 14 feet
Feet, yeah,
above grade.
yep. And then the building mounted lighting is at 16 feet. I believe the lighting plan is presented is compliant with the requirements of the code. But I will encourage you, it appears that the light fixture, the lighting standards, the pole mounted lights that are close to the building, in a couple locations, they're very close to the lighting that's on the building as well. And there are some fairly bright areas. And by my sense of things, once you get over 9 or 10 foot candles, that is relatively bright when you have a little ways away, 2 or 3 foot candles. And so if there's anything that you all could do to reduce those bright spots, I think that would enhance the project.
Understood.
It's certainly within code the way it's presented, but it's just a friendly suggestion.
Yes, sir.
We do love our night sky here. Does anybody else have comments or questions?
Have I missed it? What's the Kelvin on how hot are these bulbs?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually have to admit I wasn't paying attention. I'm not sure if it's identified.
I couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
You advising what we're suggesting?
Yep.
I can't see it anywhere.
Okay, no, I looked. I don't think it's identified on this. It may be in some of the other.
I believe it was on ANAP 11. I'm looking at this that was submitted.
Okay. And just for the record, since I'm not
Yes, sir.
100% sure we have it, if you wouldn't mind just reading.
Looks like these lights are lumen output. I'm not reading the footnotes, but it appears to be 6,864.
Oh, I think what we're after would be a K or a Kelvin, and that's the color of the lights. I believe our latest version of the code we adopted had a maximum, I believe it was, double check this, but was that 3,000 or 3,500?
I think 4.
Or maybe we had 4, yeah.
These are, according to the code, 4,000K.
Okay, so that
So
would
they
be,
meet-
they meet the new version, good. Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments about the landscape plan? It looks like it's compliant. Lots of live oaks, variety. Any other questions or comments? Okay, try to be consistent with how we do this. I believe we ask for audience input before we entertain motions these days, so. Any other comments from staff?
Request the attendance staff report into the record.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I believe, and just for the record, the staff report does recommend approval. I'm sorry, the language I believe is it finds that it complies with the standards. Yes, meets the requirements, yes. Any comments from the audience?
I think it should go. Short and sweet.
She says she likes the project.
Yes, okay, very good. Okay, in that case, the next step here, folks, is a motion of some sort, and I don't make those, I just...
Make a motion to,
Chief, we had a question, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Miss Eileen had a question.
If you could come up to the dais and identify yourself, please. And if you could spell your name, thank you.
My name is Jessica West, and I'm representing Elmore's Landing,
Okay,
which is the parcel right next door to this
Yes, ma'am.
development. This is probably the wrong place and time to bring this up, and I apologize in advance. But we have discovered what we consider some clouds on the title, and we love Dr. Reuter, and we don't want him to build on a parcel that the title doesn't seem clear to us at all. And I guess this is the right time to bring it up, but the title, when it changed hands over a number of times, the first thing that happens is the first parcel number listed on that land disappears. And then it has another number the next time it changes hands under a warranty deed. And the second question we have is the third time it changed hands, it went from Everett Smith to 38 TV, and it was, the document itself was prepared by William S. Howell Jr., and then it was witnessed by William S. Howell Jr., and then it says that it was sold for $1, and then later on the sales list it shows it sold for $425,000. We're concerned that somehow or other, during all those transactions, we don't understand what happened. First of all, I don't understand how a parcel number can disappear.
okay. Is that the general extent of your questions?
Yes.
And the reason I ask that is that this board, this body, the Design Review Board, doesn't entertain anything to do with title or legal matters. We're design and landscaping and lighting and that sort of thing. So I'm confident.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly what.
Well, that's
to do.
okay. I wanted to hear because you may have mentioned something that might have had to do with something that we consider. And so I wanted to hear you out, but based on what you've described, I'm pretty confident that it's not something that falls within the purview of this body.
Thank you.
And so,
Can you tell me?
well, I was going to, my next comment was to ask staff, our attorney is not here right now, but Mac is a very knowledgeable individual in some of these matters, and so I'll direct the question to Mac.
The first question, the parcel number changing, that is not uncommon. The property appraiser assigns those numbers. That's not a legal representation of the parcel going through time. The legal description is. That's merely an identifier for purposes of creating a tax bill.
Okay. Well, as I say, we love Dr. Reuter. We just didn't want him to build on something that the title might not be.
In addition to that, we require an opinion of title or title insurance as part of the application process, and we have that.
Okay. That was all. I just
Okay,
had
thank you,
those
Mac.
concerns.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
very much for indulging me.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Okay, any other questions or comments from the audience? All right, in that case, I believe you were in. Oh,
I just had one question.
okay, if you could, please come forward for the record. We have to capture you on the recording. No, you have to come forward, please.
No, I love Dr. Reuter. I love them. I mean, they're awesome. And, you know, I'm, Samantha Dondara.
Could you spell that, please?
Samantha Dondara, Douangara.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I own, Elmore's Landing. I just wanna make sure that, like, we have parking. Because I remember when we were, like, going, you know, all of a sudden, about this place.
Sorry to get emotional about this. I don't even know what I got myself into by this place. So, anyways, I know parking is an issue. And when we bought that place, we talked to the rooters, right? DOT owned that property. I just want it in writing that we can use that property. Because we were working with the rooters, and all of a sudden everything got quiet. We were working together with DOT. We met with DOT, and, you know, DOT owned that property, and basically was like, yes, Elmer's Landing entrance is very dangerous. So, I just want to make sure that we are covered for parking.
Okay, I believe, and again, I'm going to ask Mr. Carpenter to maybe clarify this, but my understanding of what you just described, it sounds like you're talking about an issue that affects an adjacent parcel. That is not, the adjacent parcel, Elmore's Landing, is not before this board at this time. We're considering the project that's been presented to us in that parcel of property.
Okay.
So I cannot make any assurances to you about what's happening on your property or any sort of agreement between you and adjacent property owners. So Mac, I don't know if you want to add to that, but.
Sure, I'll be happy to address that. As the chairman indicated, this is the design review board. They are not a final approval authority. They review parking for the particular application that is before them. I do have a question. Do you have any kind of written agreement for parking off-site?
No, we don't. We're working together.
Even with DOT, if they indicated, we don't care if you park there in the meantime while we're not using this particular property, the county requires an off-site parking agreement if you need parking that exceeds what you have available on site. So we cannot guarantee you that you can use that parking over there. Now, you may work out an arrangement with them to use their lot after hours with a written agreement that specifies number of spaces and the hours that they can be used. And the county would certainly
Exactly, and this is where it
look
gets
forward
shady.
to that. But that is not something the county can grant you. The adjacent property owner could possibly grant that if the parking is not used for their use during the time that you need it. But there is a process for that, to formalize that kind of arrangement.
Okay.
But that's not something that this board or any other board could unilaterally grant the right to use someone else's parking. There's a process for that, and we'd be happy to help you with that.
Okay, the thing is, we were working on that, I don't know. Okay,
Yes,
this
ma'am,
is
and-
wrong time.
Yeah,
this
and-
meeting, so.
Yes, again, we're here, we have to listen to your question to make sure your question, determine whether it does or doesn't have anything germane to do with the project we're considering. And based on what you've just described and the staff's response, I'm pretty confident that we can't take up your concern at this time at this board. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the audience? All right.
I'll try to make
Thank
a
you.
motion.
Yes, sir.
Motion to approve as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do you have any other questions or comments among the board? All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm abstaining from voting.
Oh, okay. Have you turned in your,
I don't need to recuse myself on
Oh,
it, but
abstaining.
I'm
Okay, understood.
abstaining, yes.
okay. Karen, have you captured that for the record? All right, I do have, I guess, just one question before we proceed, and I know that. Thank you. Mac, I'll direct this question to you, and certainly feel free to pass until such time as we have an attorney present, but procedurally, is it permissible for a member of this board to abstain?
If they have a reasonable conflict, and now that our attorney's here, I'll.
Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect.
I apologize for that.
Wow, that was magic. I didn't even see you walk by.
I apologize for being late, my calendar still had 6 o'clock.
That's okay. Would you like me to repeat the
Voting
question?
conflict, if you feel you have a voting conflict, if something that you would be voting on might inure to your special private gain or loss or that of a family member.
It doesn't, but the matter that we were just voting on, one of the audience members that got up to speak is somebody I have a very long relationship with as a client. I am not involved with this at all, but I don't feel comfortable voting.
If you feel uncomfortable with it, if you feel like they would create a conflict, then you would be okay with abstaining from voting.
Okay, all right, very good.
Abundance of
Thank you.
caution.
I want to make sure that the action doesn't somehow get
Yeah,
unraveled by,
Exactly.
yeah, so, sorry.
Although what you described doesn't sound like it technically meets the level of a voting
It's
conflict.
not a conflict, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. We're ready for the next item, I believe.
Taco Bell building sign, I request the staff to evidence, I think the applicant here to make their presentation.
Okay, I didn't say this, and I don't know if it's important for me to say it, but the last motion passed 4-0 with one abstention. Is that the correct report? Okay. Yes.
How's that for?
1, 2, 3, 4, and one abstention. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's why we waited for Lee.
Yes. It's gonna happen, yes. Okay, I'm sorry, yeah, the Taco Bell presentation. Do we have a presentation?
I guess we may not have anyone here for that sign.
Okay.
I don't know what the presentation.
Oh, okay, if you're the applicant and just want to introduce yourself, we can,
I'm Terry Ames.
okay,
I represent Southern Signs.
okay,
We're the installer of the sign.
okay. I guess,
The sign, the plaza does not have a master sign, that's why we're here.
okay,
But the sign complies with the code.
okay.
Unless you would like to know something else.
I, I think, okay, we have 3 items on the agenda relating to Taco Bell. We have Taco Bell building sign, we have a Taco Bell color deviation, and the title implies that it does not
I'm
come.
only
Yeah.
here for the sign.
Okay, good, so, all right. Okay. And then we have Taco Bell building material and backlighting deviation. Does the backlighting deviation have to do with anything you're doing? No. Okay, in that case, I think we should take up the sign first, separately.
And the light, the backlighting has nothing to do with the sun, correct?
Correct. That would fall in the general contractor.
Yeah, okay. All right, and I guess one other procedural thing, just to be fair to the applicant, I appreciate you being here, sir, but I want to make sure I don't put you in a position of being the quote applicant if you're technically not the applicant, because I don't think,
I'm just the applicant for the sign.
for the sign, okay. All right. So, does anybody have any questions about the sign?
Is the sign going on part of the building that's there already, or something else that's going to be constructed?
It's going on just like you see in the art.
So there'll be the slats, and then it'll
Yes.
go on top of that?
Yes,
Okay.
that's standard for all the Taco Bells.
Okay.
So am I reading correctly, the letters, channel letters are white, the
Yes.
face?
Yes.
And there's a logo in here somewhere,
Right in the middle.
okay. And does it have a color?
Taco
Am I
Bell-
missing that?
Taco Bell purple, and the bell is white.
Okay. And the purple is a logo color?
Excuse me.
What's that?
This is where the old Burger King used to be?
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
we've got the building material and backlighting deviation. And then this sign would go on that building material. So can we approve the sign before we approve the material? Or will this, I guess, will the sign change whether we approve the?
No,
material
the
deviation?
sign is,
Sign will be the sign.
regardless of what the slats situation is, the sign will remain the same.
Okay.
Is it internally lit channel letters?
LED channel letters.
I think the sign's fine. I think it's the rest of the project that we have to figure out.
They
So,
wanted a lot more, but this complies with the code.
Yeah, okay.
They wanted all
All right,
kinds,
well, that's, our job is to make that decision. So, yeah.
they wanted all kinds of stuff.
Okay, all right. Well, this particular sign, we do agree that it appears the staff believes it meets the minimum technical requirements. You, sir, believe it meets the minimum technical requirements, which is nice to know. And the next question is do we believe it meets the minimum technical requirements? And if we do, let's have a motion in a second.
I move that we approve.
Second.
Okay. Any other comments from the committee? I think I neglected, there is one gentleman in the audience. Would you like to make any comments about?
No comments on that. I'm here as the general contractor and also as the owner's representative in the case question.
Awesome, okay, good. All right, unless there's anyone else hiding, there's nobody else out there. So, all in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
See you next time. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is the Taco Bell color deviation. And I believe the Taco Bell color deviation and the next item, the Taco Bell building material and backlighting deviation, we might want to consider a presentation if there is one at the same time, and then we can handle the two votes separately.
I don't know that we have anyone here to make a presentation. Apple. Let's do our best. What you're proposing is the current regional design for Taco Bell that we're doing in Phoenix Springs that has the exact same exterior finish and architecture.
Mac, I have a question. The deviation request, there are 6 items, or 6, I don't know if you call them descriptors. And I don't think I've yet seen a deviation request when it asks the question. The requested deviation is the minimum necessary to achieve the applicant's desired result with the proposed project, otherwise meeting all requirements of Chapter 13 of the Walton County Land Development Code. And the response underneath it says that, yes, it meets the minimum required, which will allow for the thing. So it's kind of this, every one of these is pretty much the same. Who writes those?
To tell you the truth, who writes the answers to those?
Yes.
The applicant typically does, and Tim actually completes that based on what the applicant has submitted.
Okay.
And the actual question responses are on page 4 of 11 of the actual application, which is right behind the staff report in the first map page.
Okay.
That's what the applicant fills out. Tim provided a little bit more verbiage
Yeah.
in support of their single word answers, based on his experience with doing.
Yes, yes. These are very detailed answers. Yes, no, yes, yes.
And
Do we have any?
You might see those as somewhat boilerplate responses if it meets the requirements.
I'm wondering,
We're trying to standardize those responses as much as possible.
Yeah.
Except when there's more information needed.
yes. So, and there's nothing wrong with yes or no responses in most cases. And I guess ultimately it's up to this board to decide whether those are true or not.
Answers.
Yeah. I guess I was, the purpose of my question was is to wonder if this questionnaire is a document that was created at the administrative level, and could be modified at the administrative level.
Good, we can make these questions whatever you think they need to be to achieve the purpose of
We're on the same page. So my question is would it be possible to ask for something more than a yes or no answer along the lines of actually justify the answer? And the one that I've thought about a lot is, and I may be strangling this purpose for me doing this, is the water tower, the paint job on the Sandestin water tower. And I've thought the answers that were provided on that application are identical to the ones that are provided on this application, and I just can't fathom that they're actually justified. And I've thought about that every time I drive by the Sandestin water tower, and I just decided I'm going to comment on it tonight, that these deviation requests it's almost a meaningless piece of paper.
The water tower came through under a different director. We had
Oh, understood. I'm not picking on you guys. But that,
we had a bit of internal conflict when that came through.
yeah, I can imagine.
It was resolved at the director level.
Yes.
As it always
But ultimately, it was our decision, and we approved it. As a body, we approved it. We had the authority to recommend denial, and we didn't do that. So,
But if you would like to change the wording of these questions, I mean, that's something that we can certainly do.
Mac, is that code or is that,
what's that?
is that application? Because I was thinking, and I was,
These questions are
yeah.
really application.
Okay. I was thinking they were in response to something the code said that has to be approved in a deviation, and they were somewhat rhetorical.
And it does speak to specific things in the code.
Yeah.
The exact wording of these questions are not there.
Okay.
And I apologize to the general contractor that I think is still sitting, he's back there. Bear with us. But
certainly going forward, if you'd like these questions to be different, we can certainly modify those.
I'll pick on the water tower in part because it's better than talking about the Taco Bell this way. But if in other words, if a question, the thing that sort of is a burn to my saddle about the water tower is that if the size of that sign were evaluated as a sign, it was like, I don't think I'm using hyperbole here. It was probably 100 times the size of a permissible sign, mounted 100 feet taller than a sign is allowed. I mean, it's a giant sign. It's not a water tower anymore. So, if someone actually had to write down, I think it's reasonable that I'm requesting a sign that is 100 times larger than what's allowed. Nobody would fault us to go, motion to reject, or, not approve, whatever.
Actually, we did have code language that says water towers may not be used as advertising.
So, well, there you go, there's another issue. In other words, there was no requirement that be noted in the application.
No, and that one probably shouldn't have even come.
Yeah, okay, so.
I think that's the core.
I mean, we
Yeah.
had,
And it was the same applicant as the other sign that bothers me, by coincidence, but anyway. It's another story. So, okay, enough of a distraction from the Taco Bell. I don't know if staff cares to run with that comment that I made and present an idea at the next meeting, that'd be much appreciated.
we can certainly do that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we can certainly work with our applicants to make sure they provide much more detail in their answers.
Yeah, I think that, put it maybe another polite, well, maybe it's not that polite, a little bit brusque way to put it is that this board decides yes, no, yes, no. What we need is the material to make that decision. And I don't think being provided the yes or no. And the gentleman that the sign, with the sign company that was here previously, I'm sure the rest of the board has noticed that I tend to comment when people tell me that things comply with the code. They got it kind of backwards, but anyway, the more detail that we have in the application, I think, the better our decisions, quicker our decisions will be made, and the more clear the reason for the decisions will be. So, okay, back to the Taco Bell. Sorry about that. I think I interrupted you, Mac.
Well, I'm looking for what the proposed color deviation actually is requested to be, and I don't see that in the staff report.
The only thing I saw was the color of slats.
And that, I think that really is what they're proposing. And then we have material and backlighting, which deals with the same element of the exterior as the next item. I think these are probably composite type material, not specifically specified in our list of allowed exterior materials. So we've got the color of those slats, we've got the material that it's made out of, and behind that there will be some backlighting, which in those that I've seen is typically a sort of a light purple that backlights the slats, and then the sign is mounted on the outside of those slats.
I have a question.
But because that was different, we felt like it needed a deviation. Not that it was, that we consider that acceptable, it just didn't recommend approval based on current code.
Okay.
By adding the slats, is the face of the building, it's a building with other bays in it that all look the same. And by adding the slats to the face of a building where everything looks the same, does that not make it an enormous
Enormous size.
sign?
Sign.
I mean, it essentially,
We didn't look at that as a component of the sign itself. We looked at it more as a component of the siding. The sign is actually mounted on that.
right.
But one of the things that we felt like the board needed to consider was the backlighting. Because if we don't bring that to you directly and you drive by, I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
To me, it's just the effect of it is that it's really drawing attention to
Kind of a
that
marquee.
corner.
Yeah.
Instead of it being the building that's there now, that has had fast food places in it that have other building styles when they're a single standalone. This is not a single standalone.
And this is being converted from a Burger King.
Right, exactly. And, I mean, that's just my, it just to me is odd that you could put that, and because it's like drawing attention to it, I understand that the sign's mounted on that, but it seems to me to become part of what's attracting people to that.
And this is probably the part of the meeting where the applicant is up here taking your direction and
Yeah.
explaining why they need what they're asking for. I'm not in a good position to be able to advocate on behalf of the applicant. In fact, that's not our role.
Yeah.
Um,
do have a question for the contractor that might help us. Sir, if you could
Representative
come
may
on
want
up.
to speak to that.
Yep. If you could introduce yourself and spell your name for the record, please.
Kevin Tingle, Tingle.
My questions are, first, how significant of an exterior renovation, I mean, the installation of these slats is not so much cost-wise, but in terms of the percentage of the exterior of this particular unit, it's a pretty good portion of the exterior is being renovated, so to speak. Am I understanding that correctly?
As far as the front and side view, I would say that that's accurate. It's going to be repainted, and then the architectural element of the slat wall will be installed.
Okay.
So only that bay will be repainted, not the entire strip center?
No, we're not painting the entire strip center. And the color deviation doesn't have to do with any of the blocks that you see on the bottom. Those are still going to coordinate with the other bays.
Yep.
Obviously, with the end cap is already by nature, it looks a little different than the other stores. The the mansard, that is basically that entirety of height there of the slat wall. That stucco portion of that mansard is already pulled forward by 5 or 6 feet, and it's like that on each end of this shopping center, so it's not a traditional just straight line anyway, and so I think that was done probably purposefully to draw attention to whatever that tenant is on each end is maybe an anchor tenant, and so we are just wanting to take advantage of that because it's not important for you guys, but you know, normally there are standalone applications, and so in trying to move to an end cap, it did present some challenges where we could not do the standard Taco Bell wall or rust wall or tower that we wanted that was actually going to stick up probably 5 to 6 feet higher in the corner. And so there was, I know that our design team, Design Plus, worked with staff and senior staff to come up with a solution that would fit within the scenic corridor. And I think that's what you're seeing now is that slat wall now has been reduced even in height from the one that's in the Funiac by, I think, 3 or 4 slats. So we wanted to reduce it so that it would just fit the existing mansard height that's there. So we don't have to add any other height to the shopping center, nor do we have to change that in any way.
Okay. Okay, and that may actually take care of my next question, which is if y'all had built the parapet, I was going to ask staff why the parapet doesn't wrap around the exposed mechanical on the backside, because the code now, I believe, requires that there be parapet on 4 sides. But it sounds like the parapet's existing, and so, Mac, I guess we can't reasonably, can we require that they?
Yeah, within the renovation, it needs to be brought up.
Code, okay, so you're aware, I believe, that what would be reasonable would be on the, what is labeled as the rear elevation. I think that'd be the south elevation. The parapet would actually need to wrap back around to the width of the unit and screen the satellite and mechanical.
Well, I guess my comment on that would be that would be a significant change to the landlord's structure, the actual shopping center, because there currently is a parapet that does go all the way to the back. We are not putting the slat wall on an entire parapet. It actually, we're only putting on the mansard that sticks out. But currently there is no
I understand, and this
across the back of any of the shopping centers.
Understood, but I guess we buy into the slats are not a sign because they're part of the parapet.
They're an architectural element that's attached to the existing building.
To the parapet, yes. So you're renovating the exterior of the building. If you're renovating the exterior of the building, you need to bring the building, that portion of the building up to code.
Well, we're certainly adding the architectural element to the exterior of the building, but I guess it could be tit for tat, whether you call it a renovation of the exterior or what extent. Obviously, we are not changing the location of any windows or any doors.
Understood.
But
one of the elements.
We still have a canopy and a sign and a menu board typical to what's there.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're trying not to make structural changes. That was one of our goals here, was not to make structural changes to the actual building that would prevent 15, 20 years down the road a situation where another tenant could be coming in because we had made too many structural changes. Like originally we wanted to take off the mansard completely because it really just wasn't in line to have that sticking out. We wanted to go straight up, but at that point,
well, there's 2 problems.
We didn't want to get into that. That's
okay. So give me a chance, if you would. Using the example of taking the parapet off the building, you would not have been allowed to do that unless you had somehow screened the mechanical equipment.
Right. I'm talking about the mansard, not the parapet. They're both built in the same, but the height that you see, it's 2 functions on these 2 sides. It is a parapet wall that goes all the way up and screens the rooftop elements.
Yep.
But everywhere that you see the slat wall, that framing is also pulled toward the street.
Okay.
by about 5 feet and provides.
Okay, so when you're talking about mansard, you're talking about the stuff attached to the face of the parapet.
That's correct, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, so from our perspective, or at least from my perspective, and certainly the other members of the board can decide this, but I think this speaks to Colleen's first question, which is, if the sign is only the Taco Bell letters and the Bell logo, then the other stuff, I think, is reasonable to consider to be a renovation of the exterior of the building. If the exterior of the building is being renovated, then it needs to be brought up to the current code.
What might be a compromise in order to achieve the purpose of the board is to provide some kind of alternate screening on those areas where we don't have the screening that exists on the rest of the building.
That's a great, yeah, because there's a residential neighborhood to the south of this, as I understand that.
There are, and there are a number of public streets that you can view the backside of the building and the unscreened equipment from.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good point. I mentioned parapet across the back of the building. That's actually not my place to decide what's across the back of the building. It's just that the code requires that the mechanical equipment be screened. So you could determine there could be some element mounted on the building, on the roof itself. But from the drawing, and one thing I'll give y'all a compliment, that's the most detailed drawing that I've seen presented to us about what's on top of the building, and that's much appreciated. Most people don't draw what's on top of the building, and then we have the nasty surprise after the project's completed that they didn't screen it. Yeah. No, well, don't learn the wrong lesson from that. But anyway, that's appreciated. So, that would be my comment is that I believe it would be appropriate to require screening on the backside of some sort on the backside of the building. That brings me to my last question, which is to try to give you and your client the most full consideration possible. I'll ask, if we are at all nervous that we don't have enough information, my question for you is what is the effect on the project of us continuing this until the next meeting, which I believe will be on October.
Well, without even knowing that date,
Yeah.
I can tell you from my point of view, it would be catastrophic because we have an opening date of January 1st.
Okay.
And I actually need to start next week.
Yes.
Actually, doing some demo portion. And so.
But you wouldn't be putting the particular stuff we're considering up until later.
We
So
would be starting first with demo of the interior, obviously the first, still have a lot of their equipment and seating packages and
Yeah.
things in there, so we would be clearing those items out. But, a lot of these items that we're talking about with the slab wall sign, other elements have fairly long lead times.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so, for that reason, if the screening is the only issue, then I would ask that we approve the, maybe coming back just for the screening, which I know we have to work with staff to come up with an appropriate screen, but that would be done.
yeah, we could recommend, if that were to be how we proceeded, we could recommend approval contingent on an acceptable screen, and then you get to the next, because you're probably going to be in front of the planning board, or did they go to the planning board next?
I don't think this one will go.
Okay. Stops with us,
We
okay.
could certainly condition your approval of this to require that screening.
Yeah.
And staff could make sure that does happen in an acceptable manner.
Okay. So do we have any other, so we kind of get this thing ferreted out here, do we have any other questions or concerns that we want to talk about?
We're just talking about the material at this moment, or are we talking also about
The lighting?
whatever the lighting is?
Well, that's the question is are we going to have sufficient information to render a decision this evening? I mean, I can, since I'm the sole design professional here tonight, I'll mention that the kind of concept of the marquee wrapping around the building, there's not that many projects that we probably work for, but I know that is the typical, the Taco Bell, the freestanding Taco Bells, that's what they have on them now. So, you know, maybe for your benefit, sir, is, I don't know if you've noticed the Chick-fil-A that's not far down the street. That was a project that took us a little while to get through. I think we may have actually made more than one meeting. But we finally came to I think, pretty satisfactory place where their normal sign package, and this was impacted by the fact that the project sits on a corner that's a fairly acute angle. And so, but we worked with them very closely and reduced the number of signs and kind of honed in on the signs that mattered to them. And we got to a project I think that's very successful. I don't think anyone driving by would miss the fact that it's a Chick-fil-A, and but it doesn't have quite the number of signs on it that it was going to originally have. I think more recently the McDonald's renovation did the same thing. So don't feel like we're picking on you.
No, I don't at all.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we've looked at that. We've looked at the Whataburger orange and white roof. We've
Yeah.
looked at the bright red that's on the Chick-fil-A.
Well, the Whataburger, that was predates this code.
I know,
Yeah.
a lot of this was predating, but we're looking at what is in that area, and we
Yeah.
tried to come up with a design that, you know, is in line with Taco Bell corporate design and colors, which they have a lot to say in.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have full run of that either.
Yeah.
And so we feel like that what we've come up with is very appealing and fits into the scenic corridor and doesn't stick out abnormally with the architecture element nor with the colors, which the colors, you know, this slack wall is metal, is the material, and there just was not a color that was close enough to the two colors that standard uses, which Taco Bell calls barnwood, which is really a dark gray, and then a status bronze, which is just a real deep bronze color that just happen to go well together. But I don't know if we can call this their corporate colors, but it certainly is part of their corporate color scheme that goes with the corporate colors. And so we did find, and I think you'll find somewhere in there, we actually called out 2 Munsell colors that we found that were closest to it. So that it actually is representing a Munsell color and not just the barnwood status bronze, but ultimately they're going to be those colors, or very, very close to it.
Okay, and then one last, I guess this comment is directed to staff, and that is that since the lighting portion of this, the third item, is a deviation, this, the usual, does not set a precedent. No other applicant could come to us and say, I want to have what Taco Bell has, they got purple lights, I want purple lights. Well, I guess they could come and ask, but we could deny it. So, I guess do we want to jump into the colors, or the lighting, do we want to talk through them? Yeah.
Am I seeing this correctly, that there's really just one of the slats has lighting attached to it?
Yeah, I need to
And,
understand what
and
this looks like.
it basically is an indirect type of light?
Provides kind of a halo effect behind the slatting.
Oh.
Yeah, I just jumped on. Okay.
Okay.
Same, yeah. Yeah, so and Madam Attorney, are we allowed to jump on the internet and look at other Taco Bells so we can try to understand this? Is that,
As long as the applicant doesn't have any objection to it, I
Yeah.
don't understand.
okay, so,
Would you say this roughly represents it?
Yes, I would say that this roughly represents it, because the slat wall, although I wasn't in on this design, but I've been in enough conversation to understand that the slat wall does stand off of the building by as much as a foot, and that just gives room for that slight purple lighting to kind of just glow in the background. It certainly isn't meant to be an overwhelming purple light that would overwhelm the sign. The sign is going to be lit separately, but it does provide a glow behind the slats is one way I would describe it.
Kind of a halo effect. A halo effect.
So, are you ready for comments?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
I'll just make a few comments just to sort of start us going in somewhat of a direction. I don't have a bit of trouble with that color being an accent color that deviates from the Munsell colors that are approved in our code right now. Very close, and it looks nice, the color itself. I have similar concern to yours, and now that I'm seeing this treatment on other Taco Bells even more so, that it creates a marquee effect and it really kind of brings out that sign. When you look at the intent of the code is that the colors, the signage, whatever, does not unduly attract attention to the building. That's the general intent. And so I think this is very much moving in the direction of doing that. Not necessarily intentionally on the applicant's part. They're trying to maintain their corporate look. But that's the end result, I think, and that's what matters to us and to the county, I think, per code. I really have a problem with purple lighting. I can tell you that right now. I don't like the little Christmas lights hanging on buildings, much less, I mean, I'm okay with them at Christmas, I'm not screwed, but the ones that stay year round, it just, so that's sort of where I'm feeling at the moment on each of those items. And the fact that it is in a center, that nothing else in that center looks like that treatment, also to me even makes it draw more attention. So I'm struggling with it. I'm not struggling with the purple lighting. I think that is too much of a deviation from the code for.
I'm kind of feeling like you. I think when you put the light back there, that whole thing becomes part of the sign. And at that point, you've kind of blown your square footage allowances. So I don't have a problem with the slats. I think the colors are probably close enough to the approved Munsell, and they're not, a horrible vivid green or pink or whatever. So I think that's okay with me. But I think as soon as you turn that switch and turn that light on, that whole facade that you're putting in there with the slats becomes part of the sign, and at that point you now have exceeded your allowable square footage that's allowed for signs.
Well, it's good I still have 3 votes, so I'm excited about that. But I would say that even the picture that you're looking at, obviously that slat wall is a lot bigger and it has multiple lights in it. And we're talking about just one strip of LED lights. And so I think with the reduced height of the slat wall and only the one strip of light, I think it could minimize your concerns once it's installed and you're driving by. I don't think you're going to drive by and go, I missed it on that one. But I think that's just my opinion, just to put forward, is that I think from what the picture, it's hard to get an exact picture because it hasn't been done this way before. And so, I know when the design team was working with staff, obviously staff came tonight with a recommendation to approve based on all the conversations that we've already had about what do you think about this, and should we reduce the lights and not have 2 strips, one at the top, one at the bottom, and the colors and all of these things, because our goal is obviously to bring you a package that you're comfortable with. And so I'm just letting you know that there has been concessions to try to get to a package that we think that you would like, and that we would all like when we drive down CD98.
But we can't see that tonight.
Yeah, so here's what I think I'm hearing.
And it's hard to see until it is built. It's hard to.
So let me ask you, and this is your opinion, and I'm not asking you to speak for the owner. This time I asked the question. But would it be your opinion that the owner would like to go ahead and install that light? And if this board, during a period of a few days, had an opportunity to go by and look at it and and acknowledge they like it or they don't like it. And if they didn't like it, you would then disable the lights.
You're not entirely different from where I was going to head, which is I'm hearing, so we've got essentially 3 items before us. We've got the color deviation, which I think I've heard just about everybody, nobody's objected to the colors of the slats and the gray, the fountain gray, it's called. So we're good there, perhaps. I haven't voted on it yet, I'm just trying to summarize. The building material deviation, I haven't heard objection. I think everybody, at least everybody's voicing opinion seems to be okay with that. The question of whether the nighttime effect of the backlighting changes the nature of this cladding, or whatever you want to call it, the slats on the building. That seems to be the thing in play. And I believe we would, Madam Attorney, we're okay peeling off, if we were to do this, and don't get upset yet, that the third item is Taco Bell building material and backlighting deviation. We have the latitude to approve the building material portion, but we could continue the backlighting portion. I can tell you that just from a I think procedural perspective, the package of information you provide some very nice renderings of the daytime appearance of the building. We jumped online and found some nighttime appearances of other buildings, but what we don't have is y'all's presentation of what the nighttime appearance of the building would be. And so where I'm going is you don't need to build it. You got some very capable architects, it looks like. Have them do a rendering, just turn these renderings into nighttime renderings. We'll continue that portion. You can bring that portion back next month. Okay. I think that's a way to keep this project moving. Now, I may have misunderstood someone's input, so I'll shut up in a second. But
I agree with the color of the lighting. I think that it shouldn't have any lighting behind the slats because it does make it a big sign.
Yeah.
It has that effect. I'm not sold on the slats themselves.
Okay.
As far as if they are allowed as the materials and colors and everything, I'm good with. And I guess the design professional can probably speak to it better as far as the impact that would have on the rest of the shopping center, how it would look when you have a shopping center that has what, 2 or 3 other buildings in it, and none of them have that. You know, because I know there are shopping centers that have different details on the front. You go to Grand Boulevard and the different stores have different things, and I think it's fine. And I don't mind, you know, the way this looks. My only question is whether it works.
Okay, that might be answered by perhaps an overall, an overall elevation of the entire project, I guess.
Right.
I think that sounds like we're pulling one more of the items back off the potentially approved.
That's just those are just my concerns.
Yeah.
But,
from a design perspective, this project is a fairly plain background building, and so in the sense that, yeah, this corner end cap is going to look different, but it's not as, I would describe it as it will look different, but I don't think it looks bad in contrast. I don't think, for my personal opinion is that I don't think you will see a whole lot more than what we see in this rendering, that, it's a long horizontal building, pretty regular plain openings with storefront in them,
yeah, and that's not a big concern of mine.
Yeah.
The lighting is, and I think
Yeah.
we should have a lean backlight.
Okay.
It's just right.
I agree, and I would just compare, let's say comparatively, we, at our last meeting, we worked really hard on improving a sign that had an oval, what did we call that thing? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Back,
The bubbles, yes.
The bubbles, that's not the term. But that's what it is. Because it was creating more signing in effect.
Yeah.
And so with the combination of the slats and the lighting, I think we have that on steroids compared to that one. It's a similar concept, and we didn't like it there. And I can tell you that sign's on that building now, and it looks pretty darn good, the way it was changed to. So it's the same, to me, it's very different, but it's,
Yeah,
the
understood.
core concept is the same
Yeah.
that we're hitting on.
Okay. Well, so I think just procedurally then, we need to think about, it sounds like there are two items, the first two items that we talked about, if they were put to a vote, sounds to me like we probably have them passed. The backlighting, it sounds like we have a couple members who are not interested in voting on it without more information, and we have a couple members who are probably not inclined to approve it even with more information. So I want to move through this process in a way that the applicant, you know, if we deny something, then I believe the regulation is the applicant cannot come back and ask for the same again next month. An application for a deviation that's denied, there's a timing criteria, isn't there, about when they can come back again?
I'm not sure that we have any timing criteria for these types of applications in the land development code.
Okay, but they would, if something is denied, they have to make a
They'd
new
have to
application.
reapply
Yeah.
with a new application.
Yeah, so one potential outcome is that we continue the backlighting issue, we don't make a decision. The contractor and the applicant can make a decision to not come back and never, you know, just don't show up at the next meeting and proceed as they, without the lighting, or they could come back and make a presentation if they so choose, and maybe we'll be convinced.
Yeah, and that way we can vote on the rest of it, so they can go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to hold up their project at all.
Yeah.
And this goes a little bit back to something you were touching on earlier. I have a really hard time approving a deviation for something when I can't see what it looks like.
Yes.
What it's going to look like. I don't even have a rendering.
Okay, so if all that made sense, do we have any other stuff to discuss on this project? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one point, if they do have to reapply, they have to pay new application fees. If
Oh,
you
and
choose to
that's-
continue this component, they wouldn't have to
And
pay
that's,
new
no,
application.
I have too much respect for applicants coming before us to be silly and make them pay money twice and fill out all the paperwork and advertise and all that stuff. So waste everybody's time, so, okay. All right, I think we're getting somewhere. There is nobody for the record in the audience, so I don't need to ask for audience participation. So do we have anybody who cares to try to make a motion to move this?
So it's like 3 different motions?
Yeah, what's the first?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, Karen, we should probably deal with this, the color is the first item, so that's one. And then the second item is the one that I think we're talking about, maybe splitting one piece of it off to be continued.
So on color deviation, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, probably moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Taco Bell building material and backlighting deviation.
Do we need to do it in two things? Can I move to continue the backlighting portion of the?
You could do it in one motion, I think that'd be fine. If you wanted to do a motion to approve the building material and reserve or continue the backlighting component, I think that'd be fine for one motion if that's the inclination.
Then I will make that motion that we approve the building material and deviation, and we continue the backlighting deviation.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Do we have any other comments from the board? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
So to be clear, the next meeting is October 4th. October 4th. What is the deadline for submitting items for that meeting?
Well, in this case, it's a supplemental information, I guess, so it's a matter of just getting it in.
Just getting it in before, or, you know.
Well, I'm going to let
because I know
Mac
it's
answer the
close to
question.
that date.
Yeah, but I don't believe it's going to be the same as the deadline for a new application.
Karen?
Well, a new application would be 6. Inserts would be due by 20th, September 20th.
Okay, so if I use September 20th as far as getting the
That would be
nighttime rendering, which I understand that is the main thing that we're really needing is the nighttime rendering to see
Yeah, any information that is gonna tend to make us comfortable, we understand, and I'll just, from my perspective, I'll share with you, if you jump online and look at the regular standalone Taco Bells and the amount of light behind that slat wall or screen, that appears to be causing some of us some concern, so.
I understand, and
Yeah.
it could be, obviously, you know, with thousands of Taco Bells and thousands of photographers,
Yeah.
obviously lighting and angles and a lot of things could affect that. So I think we probably, the rendering is gonna be the best, but
Yeah.
we might also define maybe 2 or 3 different pictures of different stores,
And
so
possibly-
that we're not skewing it, but also you're not being skewed just by
Yeah.
a Google picture.
And possibly show a rendering maybe with the purple light and then with white light.
Okay.
Yeah. The more you give us, the basic concept is if you give us enough material that's been put in the package that we can, and this, again, the lesson learned from, I believe, the chicken place.
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. I love their sandwiches better. Anyway, the Chick-fil-A, they gave us enough material that we could ferret through it and come up with an option. Well, you know, we don't enjoy continuing stuff, but, you know, if we have enough information there, then it's been advertised, the public had access to it, and we can get where we need to be.
And I want to clarify too, the question with the white lights. So is the question about the illumination and it becoming one big sign, or is the question just the color of the lights?
I think it's both.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Based on your comment, it sounded like that if you saw one with white
Well,
lights.
if it's worth, yeah, if it's worth,
better.
Yeah, there's a concern with any light at all.
yeah,
But
there's one
then-
that's, at least,
Yeah.
the photographer made this one look white,
Yeah.
but, you know, our point is that this becomes a marquee, and a marquee is a sign. And therefore, this sign is not this big, it's this big. And that's why I made my early, if you wondered why on earth was I talking about water towers, that's just an extreme example of this.
That's
I
not.
understand.
Yeah, now this one is another rendering. That one looks real purple. So,
And again, you know, without knowing that particular build, I don't know how many lights are back there.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how bright they are, so we need to really see if the architect can give us an appropriate rendering of what the one light is going to look like.
yeah.
And I think, I understand, you know, we have to get that.
And
get that information.
I appreciate Tom's solution would be great, you know, build it, put the one thing in there. If we don't like it, you know, we take the switch away from you, but,
I'm trying to be practical.
that's one.
I've done that a lot back in the day when I was a GC, so.
And I don't know if you can do this or not, I don't even know if they have purple lighting behind it, but just find another Taco Bell in the area and see if you can produce one light. Just cut on one light, take a picture of it.
I got a BB gun.
Well, I don't know if all the lighting comes on
They
simultaneously.
all come on the same,
Oh, it
so
does?
I'm
Okay.
not sure, but.
Not with me, sir.
But what we could do is look and see if there is a build that's in a shopping center.
Yeah.
Just maybe not by this particular owner, that we might could kind of do an extensive
Yeah.
search and come up with some pictures
Yeah.
for you that
Get
way.
a black cloth and put it over, you know, there's 5 lights up there, put it over all of them at one, and take pictures.
Sounds like I may need that, we may need a church somewhere. The other.
Sounds like a taco
question,
night.
Since you've already passed this, you passed the material deviation, which is the architectural element of the sign itself. What about your comments about the screening? Because we approved, but we didn't approve with any stipulations. So I'm assuming what that means is we have.
Oh, the condition in the
option.
back, yes. Well, we've got one item left to go, I guess, but I think, yeah.
We-
No, good point, we forgot that. Well, the meeting hasn't been adjourned yet, so procedurally, we can back up and make that a
Yeah, we need to
condition.
make that.
Withdraw.
That should make.
No, we don't, we amend the motion, I believe, is the proper procedure. Yeah. Okay, sorry, in addition to your good drawing, you, reminded us of our oversight. You're gonna have some good karma building up. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, do we need to have a vote on that last motion?
I believe we already
I believe we voted, but our conversation right now has to do with us amending that motion to include the screening as a condition, the rear screening.
I think
So-
what you could do is just have a motion to put a condition on the approval that was previously granted and just leave that
Okay.
a separate motion.
Now, just let me ask a question. So, you're not voting on an exterior renovation. You're just ruling on a materials deviation. The materials that's used on the exterior and the backlighting.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking, obviously we want to be a good neighbor, we want to do what is right. But you're trying to tie the two together, you're trying to tie bringing the screening issue up to code, which has to do with exterior renovations, to our specific request of just a materials deviation.
No, I guess that was my comment that I made a second ago is that if all you're putting on the exterior of the building is a sign, well then the sign's too big. If you're putting other stuff on the exterior of the building, you're renovating the exterior of the building.
And it's actually not us that are bringing the two together, it's the code.
And I'm just trying to understand.
And actually,
Yeah.
let me ask Matt, can I ask you a question about this?
Sure.
In most cases, and we just had one, McDonald's, when there's an exterior renovation, everything on the project has to be brought up to code.
Correct.
Landscaping, parking. So, when it's a bay in a strip center, how does that work?
We don't look at all of the things that are contained in the strip center. We look at the space being renovated.
So, I mean, are we?
And if we're approving
should the
exterior-
landscaping be looked at and all that? I mean, I'm trying to get this technically right.
I believe in this particular case, they're not renovating the entire building. If we were doing that, I think we would look at landscaping. This is just one end of an existing building.
I think there's and again, I'm not a land use attorney, but there has to be a relationship between what is being done to the building and what we're asking to be done. I think that this project includes no landscaping. For the scope of the project to require landscaping to be upgraded to the current code, I don't think there's a connection there. But the portion, the element of the building being modified is the element that screens the mechanical equipment. Therefore, I see a connection between the slatting around the north and east side of the building and the screening for the mechanical equipment on the south side of the building immediately adjacent to it. That's why I brought that up.
And I guess part of my point is that it could be worse for the applicant.
Well,
If
Oh,
we
it could
wanted
be,
to-
yeah,
If
there
we wanted to
certainly-
really
yeah.
technically, you know.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, this is a project of relatively limited footprint by design. I mean, clearly they've got budgets and things like that, and if they wanted to build a brand new building, I'm sure they would have found a parcel and built a brand new building, but, I just think, it's incumbent on this board that when we're presented with a project, to have the best outcome possible, especially with deviation requests. And for the adjacent property owners to the south, a good outcome would be screening that pretty significant amount of mechanical equipment.
Let me add this real quick. This is kind of your alternative. We go ahead, let you walk on out the door without doing anything with screening. 6 months, 8 months from now, you get a code violation. You gotta do the code violation, and you gotta come back before us for the same thing you're here for now. I mean, that's kind of the situation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's almost like, while it's being noticed, let's deal with it.
So, okay, so we need to take care of as I understood the advice from the attorney is that we need a motion to add on item number 3,
To amend the motion.
We need to, well, I think we're just adding the condition that the south-facing screen satisfactory to the staff be installed.
You got, are you doing that? I'll make that motion.
Okay? Do we have a second?
I say,
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. Do we have any other questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
before you adjourn,
Yes, sir.
you need my water tower over here. What's the latest on the O'Donnell building screen, their screen?
They're mechanical.
O'Donnell.
This is the dentist's office, the blue and
Yeah.
modern building.
I didn't hear the first part of the
The
question.
O'Donnell building, what's the latest on their screening for their mechanical?
I have no update for you, but that's near the top of our list,
Okay, near. Okay.
especially as we drive by it, and it's still the same as it's been since they built it.
Bamboo's getting bigger.
Excuse me?
The bamboo is getting bigger.
Eventually, maybe. it'll-
Well, and maybe that's part of their plan, that it'll grow tall enough that it will reach the top of the building. I mean, part of where we got is, we looked at the bamboo being an appropriate screening material, but we were looking for the building official to require that it be attached in some manner to the building, given we're in the 160-mile-an-hour wind zone. First big storm we had, that would blow right off the roof, and all of a sudden we'd have no screening, and it could become, wind-blown debris. From a safety standpoint. We went back to the building official, and he said, well, come to think of it, yeah, that probably needs to be attached. And that's sort of where we've stalled out. But we're at a point now where it's time to revisit that with code enforcement. They've had quite an adequate amount of time to come up with acceptable screening and make it happen.
Maybe they should get a Taco Bell and get some of that sliding. So, okay, you mentioned you had another item.
I do, just for staff, window signage in windows, affixed to windows, it's gotten completely and utterly out of control in this corridor. I don't know what, I guess everybody started talking to each other and said, I'm not getting code violations, so you should do it too.
Well, and that's certainly something that we do experience every season. We get new folks coming into the corridor, and they look at their neighbors, and if their neighbors are outside the lines, and they think that's perfectly all right. Certainly from a real estate standpoint, we've had that experience with people selling new houses. Well, they can have one, or they've got one. Sure, you can have one. Well, we wound up on HGTV with on a deck show about Walton County. And we'd actually talked to those people in the office about 3 weeks before it appeared on TV, before I recognized them as South Walton residents. And at the very end of the show, it said, no, by the way, we did get in a little trouble with code enforcement. We built the deck a little too large, and we had to come back and remove a portion of it. So that was in about 10 seconds at the end of the 30-minute show. About that day.
Well, it would take a while because, and there are certain storefronts that the entire windows are covered in stickers. Big, huge, photographs and designs, and then there are a lot that have them across the top of every window.
I can think of a couple that have them across the top of the window right off the top of my head.
So,
We'll address that with code.
that'd be great. Quickly, thank you.
And I did have one announcement. I apologize for not making that earlier. I have with us today our newest senior planner. This is Matthew Lambert. He started this week for us. Comes with a lot of experience. Previously planning director at the city of Saraland, Alabama. We're very happy to have him.
Thank you.
Okay, any other items? Anybody? All right, in that case, we will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Assuming that's going to be unanimous.
Yes.
Karen, do you want? Or leave it here?
Just leave it there all.
Saraland, on the other side of Mobile heading.
North side.
Yeah. We go through there. I grew up in Columbia, Mississippi, and we passed through Saraland, I think.
Growing community, very growing. It's doubled in size since 2010.
Wow.
It's crazy, but that's what separate school districts do.
What does that mean when it's on red?
It's on standby.
So that didn't help it turn off.
No.
I'm on standby right
I'll do
now.
it. Well, that took longer than I expected.
All I got to say is, you are packing.
Yes.
My side, I have more to BB gun.
I should have said I got a 5-year-old and a BB gun.
BB guns ain't cutting it.
Yeah.
A 5-year-old and a BB gun is scarier than you and a BB gun.
Welcome aboard.
Well, thank you.
Don't have fun.
It's been interesting the last 3 days.
Good. Well, we're glad you're here.
It's the best way to say it. It's been interesting.
I swore they did a motion.
In my notes, I have that they.
Got to pull it up again?
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder.